At the Silver Lake Retreat, a luxury resort, a white woman asked a black woman for water when she didn't know who she was. An argument ensued. The police were also called but froze when they saw the black girl. What happened? Who was that black girl really? Watch the whole story unfold, only on H2 Black Thread. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more great stories. The golden hues of the setting sun reflected off the calm waters of Silver Lake Retreat, casting a warm glow over the serene landscape. The gentle rustling of the trees in the evening breeze and the distant chirping of birds created a peaceful atmosphere, one that Monica Hayes had worked tirelessly to cultivate. She stood near the infinity pool, gazing at the tranquil view, savoring the stillness before nightfall. This resort was more than just a business to her. It was her life's work. Silver Lake Retreat had not come into existence easily. Monica had faced relentless challenges, from struggling to secure funding to battling through layers of bureaucracy and permits. There had been nights when she wondered if the dream would ever become reality, but she persevered. Every inch of the resort was a product of her dedication, every detail personally overseen by her. Now, the estate stood as one of the most sought-after luxury retreats in the region. With its elegant villas, world-class spa, and private access to the lake, it attracted high-end guests seeking peace, exclusivity, and top-tier service. But despite its success, Monica remained deeply involved in daily operations. She personally ensured that every corner of the resort met her exacting standards. Every evening she walked the property, inspecting the pool, adjusting lounge chairs, and confirming that everything was in order. Tonight was no different. Clad in a linen blouse and fitted slacks, she moved with ease, her sharp eyes scanning for anything out of place. The pool area was spotless, just as she expected. She reached for the gate, ready to secure it for the night, when the sound of approaching footsteps caught her attention. She turned, immediately recognizing the figure making her way toward her. Patricia Lawson. Monica had seen her before, a middle-aged woman with meticulously styled blonde hair and a confident stride. Patricia was one of the longtime residents of the affluent neighborhood adjacent to Silver Lake Retreat. While many of the neighbors kept a respectful distance from the resort, Patricia had always exhibited a certain curiosity about the place, though not necessarily in a friendly manner. Tonight, she approached with an air of self-importance, her designer bag swinging at her side. The way she carried herself, the slightly lifted chin, the scrutinizing gaze, it was clear she had come with an expectation. "Excuse me," Patricia called out, her tone firm yet laced with familiarity, as if she was addressing a subordinate. Monica remained composed, watching as the woman stopped just a few feet away. "Yes," Monica responded evenly. Patricia gave a quick glance around the pool area before shifting her gaze back to Monica. "Would you be a dear and fetch me a glass of water?" she said, her voice smooth but unmistakably expectant. Monica felt the familiar sting of irritation rise within her, but she didn't let it show. This was not the first time someone had mistaken her for staff, and unfortunately, she knew it wouldn't be the last. "I'm not a server," Monica said, keeping her tone measured. Patricia's eyebrows lifted slightly, as if processing something unexpected. She tilted her head, examining Monica more closely. "Oh," Patricia said after a brief pause. "Then what exactly do you do here?" Monica had answered this question more times than she cared to count. She knew exactly where this was going. "I own this retreat," she said plainly. "This is my property." There was a brief silence. Patricia blinked, her expression shifting into something unreadable. Then, as if on cue, she let out a light scoff, shaking her head. "I don't think so," she said, a smirk tugging at her lips. "I happen to know the owner." Monica arched an eyebrow. "Do you?" "Yes," Patricia said confidently. I've lived in this neighborhood for years. I know who comes and goes, and I've never seen you before." Monica took a slow breath, holding back the urge to roll her eyes. She had encountered this many times before, the automatic assumption that she couldn't possibly be the owner of something this prestigious. People like Patricia had a fixed idea of what wealth and success looked like. And Monica, a black woman, didn't fit that image in their minds. But she wasn't in the mood for games tonight. "Well then," Monica said, tilting her head slightly. "Since you know the owner so well, why don't you tell me their name?" Patricia's smirk faltered just a little. Her lips parted, but for the first time no words came out. Monica crossed her arms, waiting. Patricia cleared her throat. I don't know their name personally," she admitted, shifting slightly. "But I know it's not you." Monica chuckled softly, shaking her head. "You don't even know who owns this place, yet you're sure it's not me." Patricia's face darkened slightly, but instead of conceding, she took a step back and pulled out her phone. "You need to leave," she said, her voice sharper now. "I'm calling the police." Monica let out a humorless laugh. "You're calling the police? On me?" Patricia gave a short nod. "Exactly. If you really own this place, then you won't mind proving it to the officers when they arrive." And with that, she pressed the call button. Monica didn't move. She had nothing to prove, and she certainly wasn't going to justify her own existence on her own property. Patricia paced a few steps away, phone pressed to her ear. Monica could hear the muffled conversation with the dispatcher. "Yes, I need officers at Silver Lake Retreat," Patricia said quickly. "There's a woman here, and she's claiming she owns the place. She's locking up the pool like she has authority." A pause. "No, I don't know her name." Monica inhaled deeply, forcing herself to remain calm. She had dealt with people like Patricia before, people who saw her and instantly questioned her presence, who demanded proof of belonging. But this was something else entirely. A few guests had begun to take notice. From the nearby villas, some had stepped onto their balconies, sipping their evening wine, watching with quiet curiosity. A couple near the pool murmured to each other, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Patricia turned back to Monica, slipping her phone into her pocket with a triumphant expression. "The police are on their way," she announced. "I suggest you stay put." Monica smirked, folding her arms. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, something flickered in Patricia's expression, uncertainty. It was subtle, but Monica caught it. Patricia had expected fear, hesitation, maybe even an apology. But she was getting none of that, because Monica had nothing to apologize for, and as the distant wail of sirens pierced the evening air, she exhaled slowly. This was about to get interesting. The crisp evening air carried the scent of freshly trimmed hedges and the faint aroma of lavender drifting from the resort's private gardens. The Silver Lake Retreat was designed to be a sanctuary, a haven of luxury where guests could unwind without a care in the world. And yet, standing in the middle of its beautifully manicured landscape, Monica Hayes found herself facing something she had encountered far too often: unwarranted suspicion. Patricia Lawson stood before her, her stance firm, eyes narrowed in a look of scrutiny. It wasn't the first time Monica had been mistaken for a staff member at her own resort. It had happened before, guests casually assuming she worked housekeeping or concierge. But this was different. There was an unshakable certainty in Patricia's gaze, a quiet demand for Monica to prove she belonged. The assumption had come effortlessly. Patricia's voice had carried the same tone of entitled expectation she might use with a waitress at an expensive restaurant. "Would you be a dear and fetch me a glass of water?" Monica had heard it before, the casual expectation of servitude, the effortless belief that someone like her couldn't possibly be anything more than a hired hand. She had calmly responded, her voice steady. "I'm not a staff member." Patricia blinked, her expression shifting from self-assured to slightly confused. Then her brows knitted together in a frown, as though she was struggling to process an equation that didn't quite add up. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. Monica inhaled deeply, keeping her composure. "I mean," she said patiently, "I don't work here." Patricia let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Then what exactly are you doing here?" It was in that moment Monica knew that, regardless of what she said next, Patricia had already decided on her version of the truth. "I own this resort," Monica said, her tone unwavering. A heavy silence stretched between them. Patricia's expression flickered, a quick twitch at the corner of her mouth before she let out a scoff. "Oh, come on," she said, shaking her head. "Don't be ridiculous." Monica tilted her head slightly. "Excuse me." "You own Silver Lake Retreat," Patricia repeated, her tone dripping with disbelief. "That's impossible." Monica let out a slow, measured breath. She had spent years building this place, years of negotiating contracts, fighting for investment opportunities, securing permits, hiring architects, overseeing construction, and curating every single detail to create the perfect luxury retreat. Yet here she stood in the heart of her property, being told by a stranger that her ownership was impossible. "Why is that impossible?" Monica asked, her voice calm but firm. Patricia crossed her arms, her stance shifting slightly. "Because I know the owner." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and who would that be?" Patricia hesitated for just a moment before lifting her chin. I don't recall the name right now, but I know it's not you." Monica let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "So you don't actually know the owner, but you do know that it's not me." Patricia's expression hardened. "Don't twist my words. I've lived in this neighborhood for years. I know who comes and goes. I would have seen you before if you were really the owner." Monica let the words settle in the air. There it was, the underlying assumption that her presence here required justification, that her ownership needed to be validated through Patricia's lens of familiarity. "So let me get this straight," Monica said, folding her arms. "Because you haven't personally seen me, that means I can't possibly own this place." Patricia bristled at the challenge, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I'm just saying it's highly unlikely." Monica nodded slowly. "Unlikely?" "Yes," Patricia exhaled sharply. "Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I won't stand by and let someone wander around where they don't belong." A flicker of irritation passed through Monica, but she forced herself to remain composed. "I do belong here," she said, "and I don't need to convince you of that." Patricia let out an exasperated sigh, then took a step back and pulled out her phone. "You need to leave," she said firmly. "I'm calling the police." Monica blinked. There it was, not a question, not an attempt to clarify, not a moment to reflect, just escalation. "You're calling the police?" Monica asked, incredulous. "Yes," Patricia said sharply, already dialing. "If you really own this place, then you won't mind proving it to the officers when they arrive." Monica clenched her jaw, but she didn't move. She watched as Patricia took a few steps away, pressing her phone to her ear. "Yes, I need officers at Silver Lake Retreat," she said quickly. "There's a woman here and she's claiming to be the owner, but I know that's not true. She's acting like she runs the place, locking up the pool, walking around like she has authority." Monica exhaled sharply, resisting the urge to shake her head, like she has authority. That was what it boiled down to. Patricia simply could not accept the idea that Monica could hold any authority here. That she could be the one giving orders rather than taking them. That she was the one making decisions rather than following them. "No, I don't know her name," Patricia continued on the phone, "but she refuses to leave." Monica felt a slow, burning frustration settle in her chest. It was never about proof. It was never about facts. It was about assumption, about control, About Patricia seeing her, a black woman, in a place of ownership and deciding without hesitation that she didn't belong. Patricia turned back to Monica, her expression smug. "The police are on their way," she announced. "I suggest you stay put." Monica let out a quiet chuckle, shaking her head. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere." Patricia's confidence wavered just slightly. She had expected fear, uncertainty, maybe even a retreat, but Monica wasn't afraid, because this was her home. The distant sound of sirens began to cut through the night air. Monica inhaled deeply. This was about to get interesting. The rhythmic chirping of crickets filled the air, blending with the faint murmurs of guests from the nearby villas. The infinity pool reflected the dim glow of the overhead lanterns, its still surface betraying none of the tension hanging thick between Monica Hayes and Patricia Lawson. Monica stood her ground, her arms crossed loosely over her chest, watching Patricia with measured patience. The woman had a triumphant air about her, her back straight, her lips curled into a self-satisfied smirk as she waited for the cavalry she had summoned. And then sirens. The wail of police vehicles sliced through the tranquil evening, growing louder as the squad cars approached. The headlights carved a sharp path through the driveway leading into Silver Lake Retreat, illuminating the pristine pathways Monica had walked so many times before. Patricia turned toward the road, smoothing down the front of her silk blouse as if preparing for an important engagement. Monica, however, didn't move. A black and white patrol car pulled up just outside the gated pool area. Another followed closely behind, their red and blue lights flickering across the surrounding palm trees. The few guests watching from their balconies sipped their wine, some shifting forward in their chairs, intrigued by the unexpected spectacle. The first officer to emerge from the vehicle was a tall man, his uniform crisp, his features sharp with an expression of quiet authority. The second officer, shorter but more solidly built, followed, scanning the area as they approached. Patricia let out a breath of relief, stepping toward them with the confidence of someone who believed she was unquestionably in the right. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she called, motioning toward Monica with a dismissive wave of her hand. "I need you to remove this woman immediately." The officers exchanged a glance before the first one spoke. "What seems to be the issue, ma'am?" Patricia launched into her explanation, gesturing animatedly. She was locking up the pool, acting like she owns the place. When I confronted her, she refused to leave. "I live in this neighborhood. I know the owner of this retreat, and I can tell you right now, this woman is not her." Monica let out a quiet exhale, keeping her expression neutral as Patricia continued, speaking with the fervor of someone narrating an urgent crime report. "I called you immediately because I had no idea what her intentions were," Patricia continued, pressing a hand to her chest. "I was concerned for the safety of the guests. She could be trespassing, or worse, trying to steal something." The first officer turned his attention to Monica. His eyes didn't hold immediate suspicion, but they carried a quiet scrutiny. "Ma'am, do you live here?" Monica held his gaze steadily. "No," she said calmly, "I own this resort." Patricia scoffed loudly. "Oh, please, that's ridiculous." The second officer, who had remained silent until now, tilted his head slightly. "You're saying you own Silver Lake Retreat?" "That's correct," Monica affirmed. "My name is Monica Hayes. I purchased this property years ago and built this retreat from the ground up." The first officer hesitated for just a moment before asking, "Do you have any identification that confirms that, ma'am?" Without missing a beat, Monica reached into her pocket, her movements slow and deliberate. She had long since learned to be cautious in these situations. "I do," she said, pulling out her driver's license and handing it over. "And if you need further proof, I have property ownership documents inside my office." The officer took the ID, examining it closely under the dim pool lights. His expression remained neutral as he glanced between the license and Monica's face, verifying the match. Then, something shifted. His eyes flickered with a hint of recognition. "Wait a second," he muttered, staring at the name on the ID again. The second officer, noticing his partner's reaction, leaned over to look. Monica arched an eyebrow. "Something wrong, officer?" The first officer's posture relaxed slightly, his face softening. "No, it's just—" He paused before nodding. "I know you." Patricia, who had been watching expectantly, froze. "What?" she asked, her voice faltering. The officer turned to his partner with an amused shake of his head. "You were on the news a few years ago, weren't you? The community outreach program in Oakland." Monica allowed herself a small smirk. "That depends. Which one?" The second officer let out a quiet chuckle. "The scholarship fund. My cousin's kid got a grant through that program." Monica gave a nod. "Small world." Patricia's confidence cracked. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes darting between Monica and the officers as if trying to piece together a new narrative. The first officer, now fully understanding the situation, turned back to Patricia, his demeanor shifting into something sterner. "And you said she was trespassing?" he asked evenly. Patricia swallowed, suddenly realizing that this wasn't going in her favor. I thought she was." "You thought," the officer repeated, his tone calm but firm. "Did you ask her any questions before calling us?" Patricia's eyes darted between the officers. I just assumed." "That's the problem," Monica interjected, folding her arms. "You assumed." A tense silence stretched between them. The guests watching from their balconies exchanged whispers, their interest in the situation deepening. The second officer, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "Ma'am," he addressed Patricia, "at any point did Miss Hayes threaten you?" Patricia hesitated. "No, but—" "Did she refuse to leave your personal property?" Another pause. "Well, no." "Then why exactly did you feel the need to call the police?" Patricia's face burned red. I thought I was helping." "If she wasn't supposed to be here, then—" Monica let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. "You were so sure I wasn't supposed to be here that you didn't even stop to ask. You just assumed and called the cops." The first officer sighed, shaking his head slightly before turning back to Monica. "Miss Hayes, I apologize for the inconvenience." Monica exhaled slowly, nodding. "I appreciate that." The second officer hesitated before adding, "And I just want to say, your work really made a difference for a lot of people. I'm sorry you had to deal with this tonight." Patricia turned toward him sharply. "Wait, so she's the Monica Hayes?" The officer let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Yep." Patricia's shoulders tensed as realization hit. Whatever assumptions she had clung to crumbled right before her eyes. But the damage was already done. The guests on the balconies were still watching. Some had pulled out their phones, possibly recording. The very people Patricia had likely wanted to impress were now staring at her like she was the problem. And she was. Monica studied Patricia's face, watching the slow dawning of embarrassment settle in. I didn't know," Patricia muttered, her voice quieter now. Monica tilted her head. "Didn't know what?" Patricia fidgeted. "I didn't know you." Monica let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, so if I were just some random woman, you'd still think I didn't belong." Patricia pressed her lips together. "That's what I thought," Monica said, shaking her head. The first officer cleared his throat. "Miss Hayes, do you want to file a report for false accusation?" Monica studied Patricia for a long moment. Then she exhaled sharply. "No," she said. "She already embarrassed herself enough tonight." Patricia flinched. Monica turned toward her estate, throwing one last remark over her shoulder. "Next time, think before you pick up the phone." And with that, she was gone. The weight of silence hung heavy in the air. The red and blue lights from the police cars cast flickering shadows across the pool deck. but the real illumination came from the growing stares of the onlookers. Patricia Lawson, once standing tall with a sense of righteous authority, now seemed to shrink under the collective gaze of both the officers and the resort guests. Her perfectly styled blonde hair, which had once been immaculate, looked slightly out of place as she shifted uncomfortably, her posture stiff, her breathing uneven. I was just trying to look out for the neighborhood," Patricia stammered, her voice losing the strength it once held. "You have to understand, I didn't know who she was." Monica Hayes remained where she stood, her arms still folded, watching Patricia with a calm yet piercing gaze. She didn't need to say anything. The truth had already spoken for itself. The first officer, the one who had recognized Monica's name, let out a quiet sigh. He took a step closer, crossing his arms as he studied Patricia carefully. "Ma'am," he said, his voice measured but firm, "let's get something straight. You called the police on a woman, without verifying anything, accusing her of trespassing on her own property." Patricia's eyes darted between the officer and Monica, her throat bobbing as she swallowed hard. I just thought." "No," the second officer cut in, his voice sharper now. "You didn't think. That's exactly the problem." Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. Around them, the guests at Silver Lake Retreat were no longer just passive observers. They were engaged, murmuring quietly amongst themselves. A few had even discreetly pulled out their phones, capturing the entire incident from the moment the officers arrived. Monica noticed one of the guests near the pool, a young woman holding a wine glass, turn to her companion and shake her head in disbelief. "She really called the cops on the owner. You can't make this up." Another voice joined in. "This is insane." Patricia, hearing the murmurs, turned a shade paler. She was beginning to realize what she had done, not just in private, but in full view of an audience that would not forget. The first officer took a step back and looked at Monica. "Miss Hayes, you do have the right to file a report for false accusation." Patricia stiffened. "Wait, what?" The second officer nodded. "Filing a false police report is a serious matter. You accused someone of a crime that never happened." Patricia's expression twisted in disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend how she was suddenly on the receiving end of consequences. No, that's not what I was doing. I wasn't trying to cause trouble, I was just being cautious." The first officer remained unfazed. "Being cautious," he repeated, his voice cool. "That's what you're calling this?" Patricia took a shaky breath. "Yes, I mean, this is a nice neighborhood, you know. You can never be too careful." Monica let out a quiet, humorless laugh. There it was, the age-old excuse. The justifications, the rationalizing, the attempt to reframe the story into one of concern rather than prejudice. Monica shook her head. "Careful," she echoed. "You didn't ask a single question before calling the police. You didn't even try to talk to me, you just saw me and assumed I didn't belong." Patricia looked like she wanted to protest, but the words never came. The second officer sighed, shaking his head. "You wasted our time, ma'am. That's not being careful, that's recklessness, and it could have ended badly." Patricia flinched, realizing the implications of what he was saying. Monica could have been arrested, handcuffed, humiliated in front of her own guests, all because of Patricia's concern. The officers exchanged a glance, then turned to Monica once more. "Would you like to move forward with charges?" Monica studied Patricia carefully. The woman was trembling slightly now, her entire demeanor having shifted from arrogance to barely contained panic. The guests were still watching, the guests who had been witnesses to the entire ordeal. "No," Monica finally said, exhaling. "She's already embarrassed herself enough tonight." Patricia's head snapped up, her lips parting as if she wanted to protest. But what could she possibly say? She had called the police. She had tried to force Monica out of her own property, and now everyone knew. The officers gave Monica a respectful nod. "Understood, Miss Hayes. We apologize again for the inconvenience." The second officer turned back to Patricia. "We strongly suggest you think twice before picking up the phone next time." Patricia didn't respond. Her once unyielding confidence was gone, replaced by pure humiliation. The officers returned to their patrol cars, their radios crackling as they received another dispatch. As the squad cars pulled away, the quiet of the retreat returned, but the atmosphere had changed. The retreat was still luxurious, still elegant, still everything Monica had built it to be. But now, Patricia was the center of attention, and not in the way she had expected. Monica glanced toward the guests who had gathered. The woman with the wine glass was still recording. Others exchanged glances, shaking their heads. A murmur spread through the crowd, one word surfacing above the others: "Unbelievable." Patricia's face burned red as she realized the gravity of what had just happened. This wasn't going away. The people around her, people she may have once tried to impress, neighbors she may have hoped to align with, were now looking at her with disdain. She took a shaky step back, turning away from Monica, from the guests, from the silent judgment now pressing down on her. But the damage was already done, because the video was spreading. Someone had already uploaded it to social media, the caption clear and damning. "She called the cops on the owner of the resort. You can't make this up." Monica glanced at her phone as it buzzed in her pocket. A message from her assistant, Lena. "Mon, you're trending." Monica sighed, slipping the phone back into her pocket. She had no interest in reliving this moment over and over again. But she knew that, whether she wanted it or not, this story would have a life of its own. And Patricia would wake up tomorrow with the weight of her actions following her everywhere. She would see the footage. She would read the comments. And she would know, without a doubt, that her name had become synonymous with exactly the kind of person she never wanted to be perceived as. Monica turned away from Patricia, heading back toward her estate. She had better things to focus on. And Patricia, she had consequences to face. The night air was still, heavy with the lingering weight of what had just transpired. The red and blue lights had faded, the officers had left, and the murmurs of guests had begun to settle. But the energy of the moment still pulsed in the atmosphere, like the aftershock of a storm. Monica Hayes stood at the edge of the Silver Lake retreat property, staring out at the stillness of the infinity pool. The waters reflected the soft glow of the resort's lights, undisturbed, untouched, a stark contrast to the chaos of the last hour. Behind her, Patricia Lawson had disappeared into the night, her once unshakable confidence reduced to nothing but a hollow, humiliated silence. The woman who had so proudly called the police, convinced that Monica didn't belong, had walked away from the encounter stripped of the certainty she once carried. And yet Monica felt no triumph in it. The officers had given her the option to file a complaint for a false police report, and part of her had wanted to. Part of her wanted to ensure that Patricia faced tangible consequences for what she had done. But in the end, Monica had made her decision. No, she had said. She already embarrassed herself enough tonight. The officers had nodded in understanding, apologized again for the inconvenience, and left. Now, as Monica turned toward her estate, she exhaled slowly. What had just happened wasn't new. It wasn't shocking. It was just another day of being questioned, of being doubted, of being forced to prove that she belonged in a place she had built with her own two hands. She had done everything right, secured funding, worked through impossible obstacles, sacrificed years of her life to make Silver Lake Retreat what it was. And still, it hadn't been enough for some people. Because, in their eyes, someone like her couldn't possibly own something like this. Monica sighed, running a hand over her face as she made her way toward her villa. She refused to let it weigh on her. She had better things to focus on. Inside, Monica walked into her sleek, modern office, illuminated by soft, ambient lighting. She sat down at her desk, staring at the guest welcome packet that sat neatly stacked on the corner. The Silver Lake Retreat Welcome Guide, a beautifully curated booklet detailing everything guests needed to know about their stay. It had sections on the best local restaurants, spa treatments, activity schedules, but something was missing. Monica grabbed a pen and scrawled a note on a sticky pad. Add meet the owner section to welcome packet. She smiled slightly to herself. If people needed proof, she'd give it to them before they even had the chance to question her. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. Lena, Mon, you're trending. Monica sighed, clicking the link Lena had sent. A video. The video. The footage was shaky, taken from a guest's phone, but everything was there. Patricia's accusations, Monica's calm refusals, the officers recognizing her, Patricia's face as realization sank in. And beneath the video, the caption read, "She called the cops on the owner of the resort. You can't make this up." Monica scrolled through the comments. This happens way too often. She really thought she could just remove a black woman from her own property. Disgusting. This is why we need to have these conversations. Racial profiling is real. The owner handled this with more grace than I ever could. Monica exhaled. The internet had taken notice. She knew this would spark discussions, some productive, some defensive, and some completely missing the point. She had seen it all before, the excuses, the rationalizations, the people who would insist, "Oh, I'm sure it wasn't about race." She was just trying to be careful. Not everything is discrimination. Monica had lived long enough to know exactly how this conversation would play out. But what mattered was that people were talking. Because this wasn't just about her. This wasn't about one woman making one bad decision. This was about a system of assumptions, a world where people like Patricia felt entitled to question Monica's presence without a second thought. It was about the people who watched, the ones who recorded, the ones who commented, the ones who saw their own experiences reflected in this story. It was about the daily reality of being underestimated, challenged, and doubted, simply for existing in a space you worked hard to claim. Monica closed the app and set her phone aside. She wasn't going to waste another second worrying about what strangers on the internet had to say. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, staring out the window at the peaceful lake beyond her property. She had fought too hard to build this place. She had earned the right to exist here, to thrive here, to succeed here. And no one, not Patricia, not the police, not the faceless skeptics online, was going to take that away from her. She reached for the guest packet again, tapping her pen against the desk. Tomorrow, she'd send the revisions to her assistant. Tomorrow, every guest who stepped foot into Silver Lake Retreat would know exactly who built this place. Tomorrow, she'd move forward, because the only thing worse than being underestimated was letting it get to you.